The heavy oak door clicked shut, the sound echoing the final brutal closing of a chapter in Christina Beaumont's life. Outside, the cold November rain began to fall, plastering strands of her hair to her tear-streaked face. One hand rested on the slight curve of her belly, a secret promise she now had to protect alone. She had just been cast out from the Devereux dynasty, the family she had married into, with nothing but the designer clothes on her back and a heart shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. They called her a gold digger, a liar, a disgrace. They had no idea they had just thrown away their future, and they certainly never imagined that the next time they saw her, it would be at their own gala, where she would hold all the power. This is the story of how a woman with nothing rose to have everything and claimed the most satisfying revenge imaginable. The Devereux estate wasn't a house. It was a statement, a sprawling Tudor-style mansion set on 50 acres of manicured Connecticut countryside. It was a monument to old money and impenetrable power. For Christina, marrying Edward Devereux had felt like stepping into a fairy tale. He was handsome, charming, the heir to the Devereux global shipping fortune. She was an art history graduate with a sharp mind, a kind heart, and a background that was, in the eyes of his family, unforgivably ordinary. Their first year of marriage was a whirlwind of galas, European holidays, and lavish dinners. Christina tried to fit in. She learned which fork to use, how to engage in polite but meaningless conversation about yachting seasons and stock portfolios. She smiled gracefully when Edward's mother, Genevieve Devereux, would make thinly veiled comments about her humble origins. "It's remarkable, Christina, how you've adapted," Genevieve once said over tea, her voice as crisp and cold as the porcelain cup she held. "Some flowers, you see, simply aren't meant for a greenhouse. They wither under the pressure." Christina knew it wasn't a compliment. It was a warning. Edward, for his part, seemed oblivious. He loved Christina, or at least he loved the idea of her. She was his beautiful, intelligent wife, a welcome reprieve from the stuffy, arranged matches his mother had proposed. "Don't mind Mother," he'd say, kissing her temple. "She's from a different era. She'll come around." But she never did. Genevieve saw Christina not as a daughter-in-law, but as an impurity in the pristine Devereux bloodline. She was an outsider who didn't understand the sacrifices and strategies required to maintain their level of wealth and influence. Every move Christina made was scrutinized. Every opinion she voiced was dismissed. The pressure began to erode the foundations of her marriage. Edward, so confident in public, was weak-willed under his mother's influence. He began to parrot Genevieve's criticisms, disguised as loving advice. "Perhaps you shouldn't have worn that dress, darling. It's a bit bold for the fundraising committee," he'd murmur after an event. Or, "Mother was just saying that your views on the museum's new acquisition were a little unsophisticated. It's best to leave that talk to the experts." Christina felt herself shrinking. The vibrant, confident woman she had been was being slowly sanded down into a pale, accommodating reflection of what a Devereux wife was supposed to be. The gilded cage was beautiful, but it was a cage nonetheless, and its bars were closing in. Then everything changed. A wave of morning sickness, a doctor's appointment filled with nervous hope, and finally a confirmation. She was pregnant. Christina was ecstatic. This, she thought, would be the bridge. A child, a Devereux heir, would surely melt Genevieve's icy heart and solidify her place in the family. It would give her and Edward a shared purpose, a bond that his mother couldn't break. She planned a special dinner to tell Edward. She wore the dress he loved, cooked his favorite meal herself, a small act of rebellion against the household staff, and waited for him with a fluttering heart. When she showed him the positive pregnancy test, his face broke into a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He lifted her into the air, laughing. "A son," he proclaimed. "A new heir for Devereux Shipping." "Or a daughter." Christina laughed back, her happiness bubbling over. "A strong, brilliant girl." "Yes, of course," he said, his enthusiasm slightly dimmed. "Whatever it is, it's wonderful." They decided to tell Genevieve the next day at the family's formal Sunday brunch. The dining room was silent, except for the clinking of silver on china. Genevieve sat at the head of the long mahogany table, a queen surveying her court. Edward cleared his throat, his hand finding Christina's under the table. "Mother, we have some rather wonderful news. Christina is pregnant." A heavy silence descended. Genevieve placed her fork down with meticulous precision. She didn't look at Christina. Her gaze, cold and calculating, was fixed on her son. "Are you certain?" she asked, her voice flat. "Of course we're certain," Edward said, his bravado wavering. "We've been to the doctor." Genevieve finally turned her eyes to Christina. There was no joy, no warmth, only a chillingly thorough assessment. It was as if she were examining a piece of livestock. "I see," she said slowly. She dabbed her lips with a linen napkin. "Well, we will have to make the necessary arrangements." And with that, she turned the conversation to the upcoming polo match, leaving Christina's heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. There would be no celebration. There would be no acceptance. This wasn't a grandchild to her. It was a complication, an arrangement to be managed. The fairy tale was over, and the nightmare was just about to begin. Christina squeezed Edward's hand, seeking reassurance, but his grip was limp. He was already retreating, leaving her to face the coming storm alone. The weeks following the announcement were a masterclass in psychological warfare orchestrated by Genevieve Devereux. The matriarch's disapproval manifested not in loud arguments, but in 1,000 subtle cruelties. She would forget to include Christina in family plans, make casual remarks about the importance of strong bloodlines in front of guests, and hire a new household manager. A severe woman named Ms. Finch, who reported Christina's every move directly back to her. Christina tried to talk to Edward, to make him see what was happening. "Your mother is trying to push me out, Edward. Can't you feel it? You're being hormonal, darling," he'd say, distracted, scrolling through stock reports on his tablet. "Mother is just too protective of the family. This is a big change for everyone." But Christina knew it was more than that. She started to notice Genevieve in hushed, intense conversations with the family's lawyer, Robert Pike. She saw Ms. Finch observing her with an unnerving focus. A sense of dread began to coil in her stomach, a constant companion to the morning sickness. The trap was sprung on a Tuesday afternoon. Christina was returning from a prenatal appointment, feeling a rare moment of peace as she thought of the tiny heartbeat she had just heard. As she walked into the grand foyer of the estate, she was met not by a welcoming butler, but by Edward Genevieve and Robert Pike, the lawyer. Their faces were grim, set like stone. "Christina," Genevieve began, her voice devoid of any emotion, "there is a matter we must discuss." On the marble-topped table in the center of the room was a file. Genevieve opened it with a theatrical flourish. Inside were photographs, blurry, long-lens shots of Christina having lunch on a cafe patio with a man. "Who is this Christina?" Edward demanded, his voice tight with an anger that felt rehearsed. Christina squinted at the photos, her mind racing. That's Leo Vance. He was a classmate in my art history program. I ran into him last week and we had coffee. I told you about it. You told me you were meeting an old friend. Edward spat, jabbing a finger at a picture. This doesn't look like just friends. The photo was cleverly angled, making the friendly hug they'd shared upon parting look like a passionate embrace. Edward, that's ridiculous. It's a misleading photo, she pleaded, looking from his furious face to Genevieve's smug one. I have nothing to hide. You can call him— Oh, we did, Genevieve said smoothly. Or, rather, our investigator did. It seems Mr. Vance has quite the reputation. He also received a rather large sum of money transferred to his account from an offshore holding company 2 days ago. Christina's blood ran cold. What are you implying? It's a very clear picture, Christina, Robert Pike, the lawyer, interjected in a dry tone. You have been seeing this man, and you have been paying him. The implication is that you were paying for his silence. Paying him with what? Christina cried, her voice rising with hysteria. I don't have that kind of money. The only money I have is the allowance you give me. Which brings us to this, Genevieve said, producing another set of documents. Bank statements. They showed a series of significant withdrawals from a secondary household account that Christina managed for expenses like groceries and personal shopping. Withdrawals she had never made. This is insane. Someone forged my signature. I never took this money. She looked desperately at her husband. Edward, you have to believe me. This is a setup. Your mother is doing this. Edward flinched as if struck. He couldn't meet her eyes. Mother would never. Why would she? Because she's hated me from the day I met you. Christina sobbed, tears blurring her vision. Because in her eyes, I am not good enough for you, for this family. And now that I'm carrying your child, she can't risk it. She has to get rid of me. The mention of the baby was a fatal mistake. Genevieve saw her opening and seized it. Her voice dropped, becoming laced with a venomous, feigned sympathy. Oh, my dear girl, after seeing these photos, after learning of your affair, we have to ask ourselves an unfortunate but necessary question. She paused for maximum impact. Are we even sure that child is Edward's? The accusation hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. It was so vile, so monstrous that Christina couldn't even speak. She looked at Edward, her entire world narrowing to his face, silently begging him to defend her, to defend their child. He hesitated. For a split second, a flicker of the man she loved crossed his features. Doubt, confusion, maybe even guilt. But then he looked at his mother, at her imperious, unwavering stare, and the weakness won. His face hardened. I can't believe I was so blind, he said, his voice cracking, to bring this disgrace into my home. No, Edward, no. The Devereux name will not be tarnished by this scandal, Genevieve announced, her voice ringing with finality. We have prepared a document, Christina, a non-disclosure agreement. You will sign it, relinquish any and all claim to the Devereux name and assets, and you will leave this house immediately. In return, we will not press charges for embezzlement. And the baby? Christina whispered, her hand protectively covering her stomach. Genevieve's smile was a razor blade. The baby is your problem. It is not and never will be a Devereux. It was a perfect diabolical checkmate. They had stripped her of her husband, her home, her reputation, and now her child's heritage. Numb with shock and grief, she stared at the pen Robert Pike offered her. Signing it, felt like signing away her life. But the alternative, a public accusation, a potential jail sentence for a crime she didn't commit, all while pregnant, was unthinkable. Her hand shaking, she scrawled her name on the document. "Good," Genevieve said, snatching the papers away. "Ms. Finch has packed a small bag for you. Your other belongings will be disposed of. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises." No one moved to help her. No one said another word. Edward stood like a statue, his jaw clenched, refusing to look at her. The man who had promised to love and protect her was letting his mother throw her and his unborn child out into the street. She walked out of the room, past the priceless art she had once admired up the grand staircase she had floated down on her wedding day. In her room, a single suitcase sat by the door. She picked it up, her mind a whirlwind of pain and disbelief. As she walked back down and towards the front door, she passed Edward one last time. She stopped, her voice a raw whisper. "I will never forgive you for this, Edward. Not for believing her, but for being too much of a coward to even question." He said nothing. Christina pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped out into the cold November rain. The click of the lock behind her was the sound of her world ending. She stood on the edge of the long, winding driveway, pregnant, penniless, and utterly alone, with a storm brewing both in the sky above and the soul within her. The first few weeks were a blur of shame and survival. Christina's phone had been disconnected, her credit cards cancelled. The few friends she had made during her marriage were Edward's friends, society acquaintances who would close ranks around the Devereaux without a second thought. She was a non-person. She sold the last vestiges of her old life, a pair of diamond earrings she'd managed to slip into her pocket, a designer handbag for a pittance at a pawn shop. That money secured her a room in a dingy weekly rate motel on the industrial outskirts of the city. The room smelled of stale smoke and despair. Every night she would lie on the lumpy mattress, one hand on her growing belly, and cry until exhaustion claimed her. The city that had once been her glamorous playground was now a hostile, unforgiving landscape. She was just another face in the crowd, invisible and struggling. She looked for work, but being visibly pregnant with no recent references and no fixed address made it impossible. Doors were politely but firmly shut in her face. Her savings dwindled with terrifying speed. She went from the motel to a women's shelter. It was clean and safe, but the communal living, the scheduled meals, and the chorus of heartbreaking stories from the other residents served as a constant, brutal reminder of how far she had fallen. She was no longer Christina Devereaux, patron of the arts. She was Christina Beaumont, occupant of cot number 12, a charity case. Yet in that crucible of hardship, something began to change within her. The grief, while still present, began to harden into something else, resolve. The tears she shed were no longer just for her lost life, but for the child growing inside her. This child, her child, deserved more than a life of poverty and struggle. They deserved a mother who was a fighter. The fire that Genevieve and Edward had tried to extinguish was rekindled, fueled now by a mother's protective instinct. She stopped thinking about what she had lost and started focusing on what she could build. Her break came from the most unexpected of places. To pass the long, empty hours at the shelter, she started visiting the public library. She lost herself in books on finance, business management, and non-profit organization. The world she had only ever observed from the sidelines. One afternoon, while reading the financial news, she saw a familiar name in a small article Walter Price the CEO of Price Holdings, a boutique investment firm. Christina remembered Walter from a charity auction 2 years prior. He was an older man, sharp and unpretentious, who had bid against Edward for a rare painting. While Edward had been loud and boastful, Walter had been quiet and shrewd. He'd spoken to Christina afterwards, not about her husband, but about the art itself, impressed by her knowledge. He had given her his card and said, "If you ever decide to do something more than just attend these things, give me a call. You have a good eye." It was a long shot, a desperate, humiliating gamble. What would a man like that want with a destitute, pregnant woman? But it was the only shot she had. She spent her last few dollars at a thrift store on a simple but professional-looking blouse and skirt. She practiced what she would say 100 times, her voice shaking in the shelter's cramped bathroom mirror. The next day, she took a bus to the gleaming skyscraper that housed Price Holdings. The receptionist looked at the pregnant woman in the ill-fitting clothes with undisguised skepticism. "Do you have an appointment with Mr. Price?" "No," Christina said, her heart pounding. "But if you could just tell him Christina Beaumont is here to see him. He might remember me." She expected to be sent away. She waited for 10 minutes, the silence of the luxurious lobby pressing in on her each tick of the clock, amplifying her certainty of failure. Then the receptionist's phone buzzed. Her eyes widened slightly as she looked at Christina. "Mr. Price will see you now." Walter Price's office was a corner suite with a panoramic view of the city. He stood as she entered, his expression, not of pity, but of keen curiosity. "Mrs. Devereux," he said, his voice calm, "although I see from the society pages that you are no longer using that name. Please sit." Shame washed over her, hot and swift. He knew. Of course he knew. She sat, her hands clenched in her lap. "Mr. Price, Before you begin," he interrupted gently, "let me be direct. I am aware of the rumors the Devereux have been circulating. I also happen to know Genevieve is a venomous old snake, and her son doesn't have a spine to share between a dozen of him. I never believed a word of it." Christina stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. It was the first time in months that someone had looked at her without judgment. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I'm a good judge of character," he said simply. "And I remember our conversation. You weren't just a pretty accessory. You had a spark. So the real question is, why are you here?" The dam of her composure broke. The story poured out of her, the pregnancy, the frame-up, the exile, the shelter. She didn't hold back, her voice thick with the raw pain of it all. She ended not with a plea for a handout, but with a proposition. "I need a job, Mr. Price. Any job. I will file papers, I will answer phones, I will make coffee. I am a hard worker. I am smart. And I will be the most dedicated employee you have ever had. I am not asking for charity. I am asking for a chance to build a life for my child." Walter listened intently, his gaze never wavering. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, steepling his fingers. "You're right," he finally said. "I won't give you charity. I'll give you something better. An opportunity." He gestured to a stack of files on his desk. "My firm manages the endowment for the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. It's a massive fund, but it's been underperforming. The board is old-fashioned, stuck in their ways. They need a new perspective. They need someone who actually understands the art they're funding, but who also has the hunger to understand the market." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. I'll give you a position, a junior analyst in the philanthropic division. The pay will be modest. The hours will be long. You'll be starting at the very bottom. But the path up will be there if you have the talent and the tenacity I think you do." Christina was speechless. It was more than she could have ever dreamed of. "There is one condition," he added. "You will never mention the Devereaux again. Not as a source of anger, not as a source of motivation. Your past is your own, but in this office, your focus is the future. Your work will be your revenge. Success is the only language people like them understand. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," Christina said, her voice filled with a strength she hadn't felt in months. That day, Christina Beaumont walked out of the Price Holdings skyscraper, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The long winter of her despair was finally beginning to thaw. She had a job. She had an ally. And for the first time since that rainy November day, she had hope. The next 5 years were a testament to Christina's resilience. She moved out of the shelter and into a small, clean apartment in a modest neighborhood. 6 weeks after starting her job at Price Holdings, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl with her bright blue eyes and a determined spirit. She named her Lily. Life became a grueling but rewarding routine. Her days were a whirlwind of financial reports, market analyses, and board meetings. Her nights were filled with lullabies, diaper changes, and the quiet joy of watching her daughter sleep. She was often exhausted running on coffee and sheer willpower, but she had never felt more alive. At Price Holdings, she wasn't just an employee. She was a prodigy. Walter Price had been right about her. She had a unique talent for blending her passion for the arts with a sharp, intuitive understanding of finance. She could look at an emerging artist and not only see their creative potential, but also forecast their market value. She could analyze a museum's grant proposal and identify inefficiencies and opportunities that seasoned executives had missed. She started at the bottom, fetching coffee and making copies, but her insightful memos and meticulously researched reports quickly got her noticed. She wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, to question the old guard way of doing things at the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. Her ideas were initially met with resistance from the stuffy, entrenched board members, but Walter always had her back, and her results were undeniable. Under her guidance, the Foundation's endowment began to grow at an unprecedented rate. She championed investments in bold contemporary artists, diversified the portfolio, and created community outreach programs that brought art to underserved neighborhoods. She was transforming the Foundation from a staid, passive institution into a dynamic force in the cultural world. Her rise was meteoric, from junior analyst to portfolio manager, from manager to director of philanthropic strategy. With each promotion came more responsibility, more respect, and a better life for her and Lily. She moved into a larger apartment, then a comfortable brownstone. She enrolled Lily in the best schools. They traveled not to the glitzy resorts of her past life, but to the great museums of Florence, Paris, and Amsterdam, where Christina would share her love of art with her daughter. Through it all, she never spoke of the Devereaux. She followed Walter's advice and poured all of her energy into her work and her daughter. She built a new circle of friends, colleagues who admired her intellect, other single mothers from Lily's school who respected her dedication. Her past was a locked room, the key thrown away. But that didn't mean she forgot. In quiet moments, the memory of that cold, rainy day would return. The echo of the lock clicking shut, the chilling indifference in Edward's eyes, the cruel triumph on Genevieve's face. The pain had faded into a scar, but the scar served as a reminder. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not in the petty sense. It was about proving them wrong. It was about building a life so full and successful that their world, their judgment, their very existence became irrelevant. After 5 years of relentless work, Walter Price, now in his late 70s, decided to retire. He called Christina into his office, the same office where she had arrived desperate and pregnant all those years ago. The board of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation held their annual vote yesterday. He said, a proud smile on his face. It was unanimous. They have offered you the position of chairwoman of the board. Christina sank into the chair opposite him, stunned. Chairwoman. It was the most prestigious, powerful position in the city's philanthropic arts community. The chairwoman set the entire agenda, controlled the budget, and was the public face of the foundation. Walter, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said, his eyes twinkling. You've earned this, Christina. You rebuilt this foundation from the inside out. You are the only person for the job. Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound, overwhelming gratitude. She thought of the woman in the thrift store blouse, begging for a chance, and she thought of the woman she was now. Yes, she said, her voice firm. Of course I'll say yes. A week later, a large cream-colored envelope arrived at her office. The calligraphy was elegant, the card stock thick and expensive. Her assistant, a bright young woman named Sarah, placed it on her desk. This just came by messenger, Ms. Beaumont. It looks important. Christina picked it up. The embossed crest at the top was instantly recognizable. It was the symbol of the Devereux family. Her heart gave a sudden hard jolt. She slit it open with a letter opener, her hand perfectly steady. Inside was an invitation. Genevieve and Edward Devereux request the pleasure of your company at the 50th Annual Devereux Charity Gala, benefiting the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. At the bottom, a note was scrawled in Genevieve's spiky handwriting. As you are the new chairwoman, your attendance is of course expected. We look forward to welcoming you. Christina stared at the invitation. The Devereux Charity Gala. The glittering jewel in their social crown, the one event they used to cement their status as philanthropic titans, and it benefited her foundation. For years, the Devereux family had been the largest single donor, a fact that gave them immense influence over the board. But now she was the board. A slow smile spread across Christina's face. It wasn't a smile of malice or glee. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated power. They had no idea. In their arrogance, they had likely not even bothered to learn the full name of the new chairwoman they were inviting. They just knew a new person was in charge. They were expecting a stranger. They were about to get a ghost. The lock had clicked shut on her 5 years ago. Now she held the key to the entire building, and she was about to walk right back in through the front door. While Christina was meticulously building her empire, the House of Devereux was slowly rotting from within. The pristine facade they presented to the world concealed a spreading decay, a direct result of Genevieve's iron-fisted control and Edward's passive complicity. After casting Christina out, Edward had done exactly as his mother wished. A year later, he married Penelope van der Sloot, a woman from an equally wealthy and appropriate family. Penelope was beautiful, placid, and utterly uninterested in challenging the status quo. She was the perfect decorative Devereux wife. But the marriage was a hollow affair, a business merger disguised as a union. There was no passion, no real connection. And after 2 years, there was still no air a fact that was a constant source of tension and disappointment for Genevieve. Devereux, shipping the cornerstone of the family's fortune, was also struggling. The industry was changing rapidly, with new technologies and more aggressive global competitors. Genevieve, rooted in tradition, refused to adapt. She saw innovation as a risk, not an opportunity. She vetoed Edward's occasional half-hearted suggestions to modernize the fleet or invest in logistics software, preferring the tried-and-true methods that had worked for her husband. As a result, profits were shrinking, and their market share was being steadily eaten away by more forward-thinking rivals. The only person within the family who saw the cracks forming was Brendan Devereux, Edward's younger cousin. Brendan was the artistic one, a quiet, observant man who worked in the family's small acquisitions department, a role that kept him on the periphery. He had always liked Christina, admiring her intelligence and warmth, and had been horrified by how she was treated. He never believed the stories about her infidelity and embezzlement. They had all the hallmarks of his Aunt Genevieve's manipulative schemes. Brendan watched the family's slow decline with a growing sense of alarm. He saw Edward, once his vibrant, charming cousin, become a ghost in his own home. Edward drank more than he used to. His laughter was forced, and his eyes held a permanent weariness. He was a man trapped by his own cowardice, haunted by a choice he could never undo. One evening, Brendan found Edward alone in the vast library of the estate, swirling a glass of scotch. "Big night Saturday?" Brendan said, attempting a light tone. "The 50th anniversary of the Gala. Mother is in a frenzy of planning." Edward grunted, not looking up from his glass. "It's always a frenzy, all for show." "It's an important night for the foundation," Brendan pressed gently. "Especially with the new chairwoman. We need to make a good impression. I hear she's a real powerhouse, completely revitalized their endowment." Edward finally looked up, his eyes unfocused. "Another corporate shark in a dress, I'm sure. Mother will charm her. We'll write a big check, and the Devereux name will remain on the new wing of the museum. That's all that matters." There was a deep cynicism in his voice that hadn't been there 5 years ago. "Is that really all that matters?" Brendan asked quietly. Edward's jaw tightened. "What else is there?" Brendan hesitated, then decided to take the risk. "Do you ever think about her? Edward, about Christina?" The reaction was immediate and violent. Edward slammed his glass down on the table, scotch sloshing over the side onto the polished wood. "Don't say her name in this house." "Why not?" "It's been 5 years. Don't you ever wonder if you made a mistake?" "A mistake?" Edward laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "She betrayed me. She betrayed this family." "Did she?" Brendan challenged, his voice steady. "Or did you just believe the story you were told? Because it was easier than standing up to your mother. I was there, Edward. I saw the evidence. It was too neat, too perfect. It was a performance, and you played your part." Edward's face went pale. He stood up, his fists clenched. "You know nothing. I know that this family is stagnating." Brendan shot back, his own frustration boiling over. "The company is falling behind. Your marriage is a sham, and you look like you haven't had a real night's sleep in 5 years. All because you were too scared to fight for the one person who might have actually made you happy. Was it worth it?" The question hung between them unanswered. Edward stared at his cousin, a storm of anger, guilt, and regret warring in his eyes. Without another word, he turned and stalked out of the room, leaving Brendan alone in the suffocating silence of the library. Brendan knew the truth. The Devereux family wasn't a pillar of strength. It was a house of cards. Their reputation, their influence, their very fortune was built on a fragile foundation of public perception. The annual gala was their most important piece of propaganda, the night they showcased their power and philanthropy to the world. And this year, the guest of honor, the new chairwoman, who held the fate of their social standing in her hands, was the woman they had destroyed. The irony was almost poetic. Brendan had no idea who this new chairwoman was, but he found himself hoping she was everything Edward had described a corporate shark. He hoped she would see the cracks in the Devereux facade, because he knew that with just the right amount of pressure, the entire structure would come crashing down. The day of the gala arrived a crisp, clear autumn Saturday. For Christina, the morning was a study in serene focus. While Genevieve Devereux was terrorizing florists and caterers across town, Christina was in a sunlit park with Lily pushing her on a swing. "Higher, mummy, higher!" Lily squealed her laughter like wind chimes. Christina smiled a genuine, uncomplicated expression of joy. This was her reality. This was the life she had built. The little girl with the bright, curious eyes was her anchor, her purpose. The Devereux, the gala, the coming confrontation. It all felt like a scene from a movie, detached from the beautiful, tangible truth of this moment. "Are you excited for your fancy party tonight?" Lily asked as they walked home holding her mother's hand. "It's a work party, sweetie," Christina said, ruffling her hair. "But yes, I suppose I am a little excited." Excited wasn't the right word. She felt a strange electric calm, the kind a chess master feels when they see the entire board and know with absolute certainty that checkmate is only a few moves away. That afternoon, she prepared her strategy. For years, she had quietly gathered information. Brendan Devereux, racked with guilt, had become an anonymous source. A few months after Christina had started at Price Holdings, he had found a way to contact her through a discreet third-party lawyer. He'd fed her snippets of information, whispers of the shipping company's financial troubles, details of Genevieve's increasingly desperate measures to maintain their image the shell company used to pay off Leo Vance the forgeries on the bank statements. Christina had it all compiled in a slim, secure digital file, a bomb waiting to be detonated. Her plan wasn't to scream or cause a scene. That was Genevieve's style. Hers would be quiet, precise, and utterly devastating. She would let them welcome her fate, and unknowingly hand her the microphone and the stage from which she would dismantle their world. As evening fell, her apartment transformed into a headquarters for her grand return. A professional hairstylist and makeup artist hired for the occasion worked their magic, but Christina was no longer the ingenue trying to fit in. She directed them with a clear vision. The look was not to be soft or romantic. It was to be powerful. Sleek, sophisticated, and untouchable. Her dress was the final piece of armor. She had purchased it herself from a young avant-garde designer she had discovered through one of the foundation's grants. It was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that clung to her figure. It was elegant and severe with a sharp architectural neckline. It was the dress of a woman who was not attending a party, but closing a deal. When she was finally ready, she stood before the full-length mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger to the frightened girl who had cried in the rain 5 years ago. Her eyes, expertly lined, held no trace of fear, only a steely, resolute intelligence. Her hair was swept back in a chic, severe chignon. Around her neck was a single piece of jewelry, a necklace of interlocking platinum circles, a gift from Walter Price, symbolizing strength and continuity. Her babysitter arrived, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable. Lily ran to give her mother a hug, careful not to wrinkle the silk. "Wow, Mummy," she breathed, looking up in awe. "You look like a queen." Christina knelt down, her expression softening. "Thank you, my love." She kissed Lily's forehead. "You are the reason for all of this. Never forget that." As the sleek black car she had summoned pulled up to her brownstone, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an encrypted number. "Brendan. He knows. Someone on the Foundation's junior board mentioned your full name to him an hour ago. He and Genevieve are waiting. Be careful." Christina's heart didn't race. Her calm didn't waver. A small, grim smile touched her lips. So the element of complete surprise was gone. It didn't matter. In fact, it might even be better this way. Let them sweat. Let them wait in dread for the ghost they thought they had banished forever. "To the Devereux estate," she told the driver, her voice even and cool. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving her warm, happy home behind and plunging into the cool darkness of the night. She was heading back into the gilded cage, but this time she wasn't the captive. She was the hunter. The long, winding driveway of the Devereux estate was just as she remembered it, lined with ancient oak trees and flickering gaslights. But tonight it didn't inspire awe. It looked like a path to a mausoleum. When the car door was opened by a valet, a hush fell over the immediate area. The guests arriving clad in their jewels and tuxedos all turned to look. Christina emerged from the car, not with the tentative uncertainty of her past self, but with the fluid, deliberate size of a woman who owned every room she entered. She ascended the stone steps, the midnight blue of her dress a stark contrast to the warm glow emanating from the open doors. And there, in the grand foyer, where her life had been destroyed, stood Genevieve and Edward Devereux. Brendan's warning was correct. Their faces were masks of controlled shock. Genevieve's polite socialite smile was frozen, brittle as glass. The color had drained from Edward's face, leaving him looking ashen under the brilliant light of the chandelier. He stared at her as if he had seen a spectre, his eyes wide, with a mixture of disbelief, fear, and something else, a flicker of an old, buried longing. Christina paused at the threshold, letting the moment hang in the air. She met their gazes one by one. She looked at Genevieve, her expression unreadable, and then her eyes settled on Edward. She held his gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of their shared history and his ultimate betrayal. Then she smiled. It was a cool, polite, and utterly dismissive smile. "Genevieve, Edward," she said, her voice carrying easily in the suddenly quiet foyer. "How good of you to host this event for my foundation. The decorations are adequate." The subtle barb hit its mark. Genevieve's smile tightened at the edges. "Christina," she managed to say, her voice a strained imitation of cordiality. "What a surprise. We had no idea it was you." "I've been rather busy," Christina replied smoothly, stepping past them into the ballroom as if she owned the place. And in a way she did. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite, a sea of familiar faces that had once looked down on her, or pitied her. Now, they stared with open curiosity and surprise. Whispers erupted like wildfire as she moved through the room, a shark gliding through a school of fish. "Is that Christina Beaumont? I thought she'd disappeared. She's the new chairwoman of the MAF." She ignored them, heading straight for the small elevated stage at the far end of the room, where a podium was set up. It was customary for the host and the foundation chair to give speeches. That was her stage. Edward, shaken from his stupor, followed her. "Christina, wait," he said, his voice low and urgent, catching her arm just before she reached the stage. She stopped and looked down at his hand on her silk sleeve with disdain until he quickly removed it. "What do you want, Edward? We need to talk, not here." "Here is the only place we will ever talk again," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper of pure ice. "You had your chance to talk to me 5 years ago. You chose silence. I didn't know what to do." He stammered, his eyes pleading. "She had everything, the photos, the bank records." "You mean the fabricated photos and the forged bank records?" Christina countered, her voice dangerously quiet. "The ones paid for by a shell corporation traced back to your mother's personal holdings. Did you know she paid Leo Vance $200,000 to play his part and then disappear? Or did you not bother to look past the convenient story she handed you?" Edward recoiled, his face a mess of confusion and dawning horror. How do you know that? "I know everything," she said, turning her back on him and stepping up to the stage. Genevieve intercepted her at the podium, her face a mask of fury. "Whatever game you think you're playing, you will lose," she hissed, her voice low enough that only Christina could hear. "This is my home. These are my guests. You will be gracious, you will accept our donation, and you will leave. Or I will destroy you all over again." Christina simply smiled at her. "You're home." "Your guests, look around, Genevieve. This is a fundraiser for the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. That makes them my guests, and this is my stage." With that, she tapped the microphone, the sharp sound silencing the room. Every eye was on her. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice calm, confident, and resonant. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christina Beaumont, and I am the new chairwoman of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. I want to thank you all for your incredible generosity tonight. And of course, a special thank you to our hosts, the Devereaux family." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the crowd before landing once again on Genevieve and Edward, who stood frozen at the foot of the stage. "For 50 years, the Devereaux name has been synonymous with philanthropy in this city," she continued, her tone even. "They have built a legacy on the foundations of integrity and community support. But legacies like the grandest of houses must have strong, honest foundations. Otherwise, they are nothing but hollow facades destined to crumble." A nervous murmur went through the crowd. This was not the standard fawning speech they were used to. "Tonight, I am announcing a new initiative for the foundation, the Truth in Philanthropy Fund. From this day forward, our foundation will only partner with individuals and corporations who meet the highest standards of ethical conduct, both publicly and privately. We will be conducting a full, transparent review of all our major donors, because true charity is not about writing a check to polish a tarnished name. It's about genuine integrity." She looked directly at Genevieve. "It's about not framing an innocent person to protect a bloodline. It's about not disowning your own flesh and blood out of spite and fear." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Genevieve's face was a deathly white. Edward looked like he was about to be sick. 5 years ago, Christina's voice rang out clear and strong. "I was cast out of this very house, pregnant and penniless, accused of crimes I did not commit. The people who did that to me are standing before you tonight, asking for your applause." She let that sink in. The silence was absolute, suffocating. "But this isn't a story of victimhood," Christina declared, her voice rising with power. "This is a story of resilience. I built a new life. I built a career. And I have raised a wonderful, brilliant 5-year-old daughter on my own. The Devereaux thought they were throwing me to the wolves. They didn't realize I would return leading the pack. She raised her glass. So I ask you to join me in a toast, not to the Devereaux, but to the truth, to second chances, and to the enduring power of a woman who was told she was worthless, but who proved she was priceless. To the future of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation, a future of transparency and honor. She drank from her glass. For a moment, nobody moved. Then in the back, an older woman began to clap. Then another person. And another. Soon the entire ballroom, save for a few of Genevieve's closest cronies, erupted in thunderous applause. They weren't just clapping for her speech. They were clapping for her story, for her unbelievable strength. Amid the ovation, Christina stepped down from the stage. She walked past Genevieve, whose face was a mask of utter impotent rage, and past Edward, who was staring at her with a look of such profound regret, it was almost pitiable. She didn't spare them another glance. Her work was done. She hadn't needed to show them the evidence she'd collected. The truth spoken from a position of unassailable power was bomb enough. The Devereaux legacy wasn't just cracked, it was shattered. The whispers would become headlines by morning. Their social standing was annihilated. Their business, already fragile, would likely not survive the scandal. Christina Beaumont walked out of the Devereaux mansion and into the cool, clean night air, leaving the ruins of her past behind her for the final time. She hadn't just gotten revenge. She had achieved justice. And it was so much sweeter. Christina's speech at the gala was more than just a moment of personal victory. It was a seismic event that reshaped the city's social and philanthropic landscape. The Devereaux empire crumbled with astonishing speed. Their stocks plummeted long-time business partners, severed ties, and they became social pariahs overnight. Genevieve retreated into the silent seclusion of her now tarnished estate, a queen without a court. Edward, stripped of his name, his wife and his fortune, disappeared from public life, a broken man finally paying the price for his cowardice. The gala was their end. But for Christina, it was just the beginning. She led the Metropolitan Arts Foundation into a new era of integrity and influence, becoming one of the most respected figures in the country. Her true wealth, however, was never measured in dollars or accolades, but in the quiet, happy moments with her daughter Lily. She had shown her daughter and the world that your beginning does not have to dictate your end. She proved that the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest souls, and that the best revenge isn't loud and destructive, but is the quiet, undeniable triumph of a life well lived. If her story of triumph moved you, and if you believe in the power of resilience to overcome any obstacle, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see that the end is sometimes a new beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you won't miss our next story of justice and empowerment. What part of Christina's journey resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening. What happens when the perfect life is built on a perfect lie? For 7 months, Catherine Vance Thorne believed she had it all. A loving husband, a multi-million-dollar empire at their fingertips, and their first child on the way. She pictured a future filled with laughter in their sprawling Manhattan penthouse. But her husband, the charismatic Marcus Thorne, was painting a different picture, one created during clandestine business trips. When a single damning clue sends a 7 months pregnant Catherine on a desperate drive to a secluded Hamptons resort, The masterpiece of deceit Marcus has been crafting is about to be slashed to ribbons. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a saga of high-stakes betrayal, corporate espionage, and a woman who discovers that the greatest power isn't in wealth, but in ruin. Stay with us. The late afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, casting long, distorted shadows across the Italian marble floors. From this vantage point, 60 stories above Central Park, New York City, looked like a schematic, a perfect grid of ambition and light. Catherine Vance Thorne rested a hand on the gentle, prominent swell of her abdomen, feeling the faint, fluttering kicks of the life within her. At 7 months pregnant, she felt both profoundly powerful and exquisitely vulnerable. The nursery was complete, a serene masterpiece of cream and gentle grey, with a handcrafted mobile of celestial bodies waiting to spin above a crib that had cost more than most people's cars. Everything in her life was curated for perfection, a testament to the combined might of the Vance and Thorne dynasties. Her family, the Vances, were old money, their wealth rooted in shipping and real estate, a quiet, unshakable force in the city's financial landscape. Marcus's fortune was newer, louder, forged in the volatile crucible of hedge funds. He was the brilliant, daring wunderkind, the man who could scent a market shift like a shark smells blood. Their marriage had been the society event of the year, a merger of legacy and audacity. Catherine traced the rim of a crystal glass, the condensation cool against her fingertips. She looked at her husband, who stood with his back to her phone, pressed to his ear. Marcus Thorne was a man sculpted by success. His Savile Row suit draped perfectly over his athletic frame, and his voice, even muffled, was a low, confident baritone that could soothe panicked investors and charm seasoned CEOs. He was her rock, the charismatic architect of their shared future. Or so she believed. "No, absolutely not," he said into the phone, his tone sharp. "The timeline is immutable. We move on the 25th, not a day later. Handle it." He ended the call with a decisive tap and turned a practiced smile, instantly softening the hard lines of his face. "Sorry about that, my love. Incompetence is the one market I can't seem to short." He crossed the vast living room, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the plush Aubusson rug. He knelt before her, placing a hand over hers on her belly. "And how are my two favorite people in the world doing?" "We're good." Catherine smiled the familiar warmth of his touch, chasing away a flicker of unease. "He's been active today. I think he's going to be a soccer player. Or a CEO who kicks his competitors into submission." Marcus grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He leaned in and kissed her a deep, reassuring kiss that tasted faintly of expensive whiskey and something else she couldn't quite name. A scent. It wasn't his usual cologne Creed Aventus, nor was it her perfume. It was floral and slightly spicy, a woman's scent. She dismissed it. He'd been in meetings all day, surrounded by people. It meant nothing. "Listen." He began settling back on his heels, his expression turning serious. "Something's come up. A big something. You know the tech merger I've been working on? The one in San Francisco?" Catherine nodded. It was all he had talked about for weeks, a complex acquisition that would, in his words, reshape the digital landscape. "Well, the key players have flown in for an unscheduled summit. It's last minute, I know, and I hate it, but I have to fly out tonight. It's only for a couple of days. 3 at the most. It's the final push, Kat. This deal will secure our child's future 10 times over." A knot of disappointment tightened in her chest. Tonight. But Marcus, my checkup is tomorrow. The big one. We were supposed to hear the heartbeat together again. His face fell with practiced, perfect sympathy. I know, my love. I am so sorry. Believe me, I would rather be here holding your hand than in a sterile boardroom. But this is critical. The timing is everything. He stroked her cheek. I'll be back before you know it, and I promise I will not miss another appointment. I'll make it up to you. A week in Moustique after the baby comes. Just the three of us. The promise of a future luxury was a common balm he applied to present disappointments. It usually worked, but this time the unease lingered. It was the suddenness of it all. Marcus was a meticulous planner. Last-minute chaos wasn't his style. Of course, she said, forcing a smile. I understand. It's for us. Exactly, he said, relief washing over his features. He stood and kissed her forehead. I'll go pack. My flight is in 3 hours. As he walked towards their master suite, Catherine's gaze fell on his briefcase, which he had left by the sofa. A corner of a receipt was peeking out from the side pocket. Normally, she would never have looked. It would have felt like a violation, a crack in the foundation of their trust. But the faint alien scent of perfume, the suddenness of the trip, the slickness of his explanation, it all coalesced into a single sharp point of curiosity. Her heart thumping with a strange mix of guilt and apprehension, she reached out and slowly, carefully pulled the receipt free. It wasn't from a restaurant or a client lunch. It was from La Perle, the lingerie boutique. The date was from that very afternoon. She scanned the items: a silk chemise, an eyelash lace bra, a matching thong. Size small. Catherine was a medium, and with her pregnancy she had been living in comfortable, soft cotton. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, began to seep into her bones. There could be an explanation. A gift for a friend's wife. A present for her, for after the baby. But why hide it? Why wouldn't he have given it to her with a flourish as he usually did? She quickly folded the receipt and slipped it back. Her hands trembling. She took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to calm the frantic thrumming of her pulse. She was being paranoid. The stress of the pregnancy was making her imagine things. Marcus loved her. He was building a life for them. He was a good man. He emerged from the bedroom 20 minutes later, pulling a sleek Rimowa carry-on. He was already in his travel attire, a comfortable but stylish cashmere sweater and dark trousers. He looked every bit the global executive on the move. All set, he announced, his voice breezy. The car is waiting downstairs. Now I want you to promise me you'll rest. Don't overdo it. Beatrice is coming over tomorrow to go with you to the doctor, right? Catherine nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Her sister Beatrice had always been more cynical about Marcus, seeing his ambition as a razor's edge that could easily cut both ways. Catherine had always defended him, painting Beatrice's concerns as sisterly overprotection. Now Beatrice's skeptical words echoed in her mind. Good, Marcus said. He pulled her into a hug, his arms strong and secure. It felt like a lie. The whole embrace felt like a hollow performance. I'll call you the moment I land. I love you more than anything. I love you too, she managed to whisper the words, feeling like ash in her mouth. She watched from the window as he got into the black town car, a tiny, insignificant figure 60 floors below. The car didn't turn east towards JFK or LaGuardia. It headed west towards the West Side Highway, towards the Hamptons. The cold dread solidified into a terrifying certainty. The San Francisco Tech Summit was a lie. The lingerie wasn't for her. And her husband was not on a business trip. He was on his way to a rendezvous. Alone in the cavernous silence of their penthouse, surrounded by the Hewland trapping of their perfect life, Catherine Vance Thorne finally allowed the facade to crack. A single hot tear traced a path down her cheek, a silent harbinger of the storm that was about to break. She was not just a wife. She was a Vance. And the Vances did not crumble. They fought back. The question was, how? The initial shock was already hardening into something else, something cold and sharp. A plan began to form in the ruins of her trust, a plan that would take her from her gilded cage and set her on a collision course with the ugly truth. The silence in the penthouse after Marcus left was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. Every ticking clock, every hum from the climate control system seemed to mock Catherine's newfound solitude. She walked through the grand rooms, touching the cold surfaces of their shared life, the polished mahogany of the dining table where they'd hosted glittering dinner parties, the soft leather of the armchair where he read the Wall Street Journal every morning. It all felt like a movie set the backdrop for a story she had mistakenly believed was her own. She sank onto the edge of their vast bed, the La Perla receipt burning a hole in her mind. It was a single piece of evidence, perhaps circumstantial. She needed more. Doubt was a poison, but certainty was a weapon. Her mind raced, sifting through the last few weeks, searching for other inconsistencies she had glossed over. The late-night conference calls, where his voice was hushed the weekends he'd spent at the office, but came home looking relaxed, not tired. The password on his personal laptop, which had always been her birthday, was suddenly changed. At the time, she had chalked it up to his company's new cybersecurity protocols. Now it seemed like a locked door she had never thought to question. The next morning, Beatrice arrived, her sharp eyes immediately registering the tension in Catherine's posture. Beatrice Vance was the opposite of her sister in many ways. Where Catherine was diplomatic and serene, Beatrice was blunt and fiery, her loyalty fierce and her bullshit detector flawless. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Beatrice said, foregoing a hello as she dropped her purse onto a chair. Did the Prince of Wall Street forget to kiss his pregnant princess goodbye? Catherine's composure, so carefully maintained, overnight crumbled. She handed her sister the receipt. Beatrice's eyes narrowed as she read it, her lips tightening into a thin line. Size small. Beatrice said flatly, "Well, that's not for you, is it? Not unless he's planning for 2 years from now. The man is many things, but a forward planner in lingerie is not one of them." She looked up at Catherine, her expression softening from sarcasm to deep concern. "Oh, Kath." What did he say? Through tears she could no longer suppress. Catherine recounted the story, the sudden trip, the San Francisco excuse, the car heading west. The Hamptons, Beatrice breathed, her mind already working. Of course, it's off-season, quiet, exclusive, the perfect place to hide a dirty little secret in plain sight. Marcus has a corporate account at the Seagate. It's one of those ridiculously private resorts where the staff is trained to be blind, deaf, and dumb. Catherine's blood ran cold. The Seagate. Marcus had taken her there for their first anniversary. It was secluded, nestled in a private cove, a haven of understated luxury. The memory was now tainted, corrupted. "I have to know, Bea." Catherine said, her voice gaining a steely edge that surprised even herself. "I can't sit here in this museum of our marriage and wait for him to come home smelling of lies and another woman's perfume. I have to see it for myself. Beatrice studied her sister. The tear-stained face was still there, but beneath it, a new resolve was hardening. This was the Vance bloodline, kicking in the same indomitable will that had allowed their great-grandfather to build a shipping empire from nothing. "Are you sure?" Kath Beatrice asked gently. "You're 7 months pregnant. The stress, the shock." "What's more stressful?" Catherine countered, standing up, her hands protectively cradling her belly. "The agonizing uncertainty, or the cold, hard truth. This isn't just about my feelings anymore. This is about my child. I will not bring my son or daughter into a life built on a foundation of deceit. I need to know what I'm fighting." Beatrice nodded slowly, a grim smile touching her lips. "All right, then let's go to war. But we do it smart. No dramatic phone calls, no hysterics. We gather irrefutable proof. We need more than a receipt for some slutty underwear." The first step was logistics. A trip to the doctor's office was repurposed. While Beatrice waited in the car, Catherine had her appointment. The strong, steady rhythm of her baby's heartbeat was a reassurance, a tiny drumbeat of courage. She asked her obstetrician, Dr. Miller, if light travel was permissible. "Everything looks perfect," Catherine Dr. Miller said warmly. "A short car ride, say a couple of hours, is perfectly fine. Just stay hydrated and don't overexert yourself." It was the clearance she needed. The next step was intel. While Catherine was at the doctor's, Beatrice was on the phone calling in a favor from a friend who worked in high-end concierge services. It was a long shot, but the world of the ultra-wealthy was surprisingly small. When Catherine returned to the car, Beatrice was tapping furiously on her phone. "Okay. I think I have something," she said, her voice low and excited. "My friend Jessica owes me one." She pulled some strings. "She can't access the Seagate's official guest list, but she has a source in their spa. Jessica's source confirms a booking was made for this afternoon. A 90-minute couple's deep tissue massage, booked under the name Mr. Thorne. The reservation notes specify 2 therapists, male and female, for Mr. and Mrs. Thorne." The words Mrs. Thorne felt like a physical blow. He was not just with another woman. He was giving her Catherine's title, her identity, in this secret, sordid world he had created. "The appointment is at 4 p.m. Beatrice continued, her voice hardening. "That's in 3 hours. We can make it if we leave now." The plan was audacious, bordering on reckless, but it was the only path forward that felt real. Catherine called the family's trusted driver, a stoic man named Frank, who had been with the Vances for 30 years and knew how to be discreet. She simply told him they needed to go to the Hamptons. He asked no questions. The drive out of the city was a blur. The familiar skyline receded, replaced by the manicured suburbs, and then the long, flat stretch of the Long Island Expressway. Catherine sat in the plush leather seat of the Mercedes, a bottle of water in her hand, her mind a maelstrom of past memories and future fears. She remembered Marcus proposing to her on a wind-swept cliff in Big Sur, telling her that his life had been black and white until she brought the color. Had that been a lie, too? Was he a sociopath, a brilliant actor playing the part of a loving husband? Beatrice, ever the pragmatist, was strategizing. "Okay, when we get there, we can't just storm in. We need to be smart. You are Catherine Vance Thorne. You have every right to be there. We'll go to the front desk. You'll say you're surprising your husband. You'll be charming, poised. They know the Vance name. They won't question you. Ask for a key to his suite. The oceanfront Villa 7. That's where he is. Beatrice had managed to get the villa number from her source. Villa 7. The most private, most expensive accommodation at the resort, with its own private plunge pool and a terrace that overlooked the desolate beauty of the winter ocean. What if he's not there? What if they're at the spa? Catherine asked, her voice trembling slightly. Then we wait, Beatrice said firmly. We sit in the lobby, we order tea, and we wait for Mr. and Mrs. Thorne to return from their relaxing afternoon. But my gut says they'll be back in the room. People like that, they want to enjoy every overpriced inch of the fantasy they've paid for. As they passed the iconic sign welcoming them to the Hamptons, Catherine felt a shift inside her. The fear was still there, a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but it was being overlaid by a chilling sense of purpose. She was no longer just the wounded pregnant wife. She was the CEO of this operation, the chief arbiter of her own fate. She smoothed down her dress, took a deep breath, and practiced the serene, confident smile she would need. She was about to step onto the stage of the biggest performance of her life, and she would not miss her cue. The unraveling thread had led her here to the edge of the Atlantic, and she was ready to pull it until the entire tapestry of lies came undone. The Seagate Resort and Spa was designed to look like it had been carved from the very dunes it occupied. Weathered grey cedar, vast expanses of glass and minimalist landscaping created an atmosphere of monastic, wildly expensive tranquility. Even in the stark light of a winter afternoon, it was beautiful. The beauty felt like an insult. Frank pulled the Mercedes S-Class smoothly under the portico. A valet, young and crisp in his uniform, rushed to open the door. Beatrice gave Catherine's hand a final firm squeeze. Showtime. Remember who you are. You own this place and everyone in it. Catherine stepped out of the car, pulling her cashmere wrap tighter around her shoulders. She was the very picture of refined elegance, her pregnancy only adding to her aura of serene maternal grace. No one would guess the tempest raging within her. The lobby was a cathedral of quiet luxury. A massive stone fireplace crackled at one end, and the air smelled of sea salt and burning birchwood. A single receptionist, a woman with impossibly perfect posture, stood behind a monolithic desk of reclaimed wood. Catherine glided towards the desk, Beatrice, a half step behind her, a silent guard. "Good afternoon," Catherine said, her voice smooth as cream. "I'm here to surprise my husband, Marcus Thorne. I believe he's in one of your oceanfront villas." The receptionist, whose name tag read Anja, offered a polite professional smile. "Of course, Mrs. Thorne. It's a pleasure to have you with us. May I see some identification?" Catherine produced her driver's license. Anja's eyes flickered from the ID to Catherine's face, then to the name Thorne. The recognition was instant. Marcus Thorne was a name that commanded respect and discretion. "Everything appears to be in order," Anya said, her smile warming slightly. "Mr. Thorne is checked into Villa 7. I must say it's a wonderful surprise. He mentioned he was here for some intense solitary work. The lie repeated by a stranger was like a fresh stab wound." Solitary work. Catherine's smile didn't waver. "He works far too hard. I decided he needed a distraction. Could I trouble you for a key to the villa? I'd like to be waiting for him when he returns." This was the critical moment. A request for a second key without the primary guest present was a breach of protocol even for a spouse. Anya hesitated, her professional training warring with the desire to please a guest of Catherine's stature. Normally we would need to call the room to get Mr. Thorne's verbal confirmation. She began, her tone apologetic. Catherine leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a confidential, charming whisper. Anya, I've just driven 2.5 hours from the city. I'm 7 months pregnant, and I'm desperate to see the look on his face when he walks in and finds me there. A phone call would spoil the entire thing. Surely we can keep this our little secret? She placed a hand on her belly, a gesture that was both authentic and masterfully deployed. The combination of her name, her visible pregnancy, and her conspiratorial charm was too powerful to resist. Anya's professional resolve melted. Of course, Mrs. Thorne, she said, her smile now genuine. For you, we can make an exception. Let me program a key for you. As the receptionist worked, Beatrice let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Catherine was magnificent. She was playing the part of the adoring wife so perfectly, it was chilling. Keycard in hand, they walked away from the desk. Villa 7 is at the far end of the property, Beatrice murmured. It offers the most privacy. The most privacy to do what Catherine said, her voice a low, dangerous hum. The walk to the villa was the longest of Catherine's life. They followed a winding stone path that meandered through wind-swept seagrass. The air grew colder, sharper, and the sound of the crashing waves became a relentless roar. Each step was a drumbeat towards a detonation. Her earlier calm was evaporating, replaced by a raw, visceral dread. Her palms were sweating. Her heart hammered against her ribs. And then they were there. Villa 7. The name was etched on a simple, elegant plaque next to a heavy wooden door. It looked anonymous, innocuous, but behind it lay the truth. Kath, are you ready? Beatrice asked, her voice soft. Catherine looked at the door, then out at the grey, churning ocean. She thought of her unborn child, floating peacefully in its own silent world, oblivious to the tsunami about to hit theirs. That image gave her the final surge of strength she needed. I am, she said. She turned to her sister. Wait here. I have to do this alone. Beatrice hesitated, her protective instincts flaring. But she saw the look in Catherine's eyes. It was not a request, but a command. She nodded and stepped back. Catherine took a deep breath, held the keycard to the electronic lock, and waited for the small green light. It flashed. With a soft click, the lock disengaged. She pushed the door open. The villa's entryway led into a spacious living area, impeccably decorated in shades of sand and stone. A bottle of Bollinger champagne sat in a silver bucket on a low table, 2 flutes next to it. One was empty, the other half full, a faint lipstick smear on its rim. A man's jacket, Marcus's, was thrown carelessly over a chair, and from the bedroom just beyond, a partially open door, she could hear voices. A man's low laugh, Marcus's laugh, and a woman's higher, lighter laugh in response. The sound paralyzed her for a second. It was real. This was happening. Moving as if in a dream, she crept across the silent room. Her hand was steady as she pushed the bedroom door fully open. The scene before her was one of lazy post-coital intimacy. The king-sized bed was a tangle of white sheets. Marcus was propped up against the pillows, wearing nothing but a pair of boxer briefs, a tablet resting on his lap. And sitting next to him, her back to the door, was a woman. She was wearing a short, black silk robe, the one from the La Perla bag, Catherine realized with a sickening lurch. Her dark hair was tousled, and she was tracing a pattern on Marcus's chest with her finger. "You're sure no one will find out?" the woman's voice said. It was a voice Catherine vaguely recognized. "Your wife, she's not the suspicious type." Catherine Marcus scoffed, his tone dripping with a casual cruelty that shattered Catherine's heart into a million pieces. "She trusts me completely. She thinks I'm in San Francisco saving the world. She's a good woman, but a little naive. It's one of her charms." He was about to say more, but he glanced up, perhaps sensing a change in the light or a sudden chill in the air. His eyes met Catherine's. Time seemed to stop. The color drained from Marcus's face, replaced by a ghastly, mottled white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The tablet slid from his lap and hit the floor with a dull thud. He looked like a man who had just seen his own executioner walk through the door. The woman, sensing his sudden terror, turned around. Her face was a mask of confusion, which then morphed into shocked recognition. Catherine's blood turned to ice. She knew this woman. It was Sloane Davenport, a fiercely ambitious rising star at a rival investment firm, Sterling Nash. She was known for her beauty, her brilliance, and her utter ruthlessness. This wasn't some random, meaningless affair. This was a liaison with a direct professional competitor. Sloane Davenport stared at Catherine, her mouth slightly agape. For a moment, the three of them were frozen in a tableau of shock, betrayal, and discovery. It was Catherine who broke the silence. Her voice was not the shriek of a hysterical wife. It was low, calm, and utterly devastating. It was the voice of ice and steel. "Don't get up on my account," she said, her eyes locked on her husband's. "It seems you're in the middle of some very intense solitary work." She used his own lie as the first twist of the knife. Marcus flinched, as if she had physically struck him. The game was over. The perfect life was a ruin. And Catherine was standing in the rubble, the undisputed, terrifying victor of this first brutal battle. The silence that followed Catherine's words was thick and suffocating. Sloane Davenport, recovering her composure with the speed of a seasoned predator, quickly clutched the silk robe tighter around herself, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. But Marcus remained frozen, his face a canvas of pure, unadulterated panic. The cocksure master of the universe was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. "Catherine," he finally stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. What are you doing here? You should be in New York. The baby is fine." Catherine cut him off, her tone glacial. "He has a strong heart, unlike his father." She let her gaze drift disdainfully over Sloane, then back to Marcus. "I see the San Francisco Tech Summit was relocated, and that the dress code is more casual than I imagined. Is she part of the acquisition, Marcus, or just a disposable asset?" Each word was a precisely aimed dart. Sloane's face hardened. She stood up, a calculated move to assert some form of control. "I think I should go." "No," Catherine said, her voice dropping even lower, yet carrying an authority that rooted Sloane to the spot. "You stay. You were part of this business meeting. You should see it through to its conclusion." Catherine took a deliberate step into the room, her presence dominating the space. She looked around the suite at the champagne, the tangled sheets, the view of the desolate ocean. "It's a beautiful room. I remember it. We celebrated our first anniversary here. Did you tell her that, or does the personal history of the places you defile not matter?" Marcus finally found his legs, scrambling out of the bed and grabbing for his trousers. "Cat, please. Let's not do this here. Let's go somewhere and talk. This isn't what it looks like." Catherine let out a short, sharp laugh devoid of any humor. It isn't what it looks like, Marcus. Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you have any idea how insulting that sentence is? I am standing in a hotel room that you booked under your name, looking at you and your associate from a rival firm half naked in a bed that you paid for. It is exactly what it looks like. The only question is for how long Sloane, seeing an opportunity to sow chaos, spoke up. For about 6 months, she said coolly, looking directly at Catherine. If you're going to have the details, you might as well have them all. It was a cruel, calculated blow designed to shatter Catherine's composure. But Catherine didn't even flinch. She didn't grant Sloane a single glance. Her focus remained entirely on her husband, the true architect of this betrayal. 6 months, Catherine repeated softly, nodding to herself. So this started just after we found out I was pregnant. That's a special kind of cruelty, Marcus. You deserve an award for it. She turned her movement fluid and graceful and walked back towards the door. She did not slam it. She did not run. She simply left, leaving a vacuum of shock and recrimination in her wake. Her retreat was more powerful than any screaming match could ever have been. Beatrice was waiting by the door, her face pale with anxiety. The moment she saw Catherine's expression, a mask of cold, terrifying calm, she knew. "Let's go," Catherine said, her voice flat. They walked back down the winding path, the roar of the ocean now sounding like a symphony of her rage. She remained silent until they were safely inside the climate-controlled silence of the Mercedes pulling away from the resort. Only then did her body begin to tremble, a violent, uncontrollable shudder. The adrenaline wore off, and the crushing weight of the betrayal slammed into her. She didn't cry out. The sob was a silent, convulsive thing that racked her entire body. Beatrice wrapped her arms around her, offering what little comfort she could. "He's dead to us," Beatrice whispered fiercely. "He's nothing. We'll call Dad. We'll get the lawyers. We will burn him to the ground." Catherine's trembling slowly subsided, replaced by an icy resolve. "Not yet," she said, her voice raspy. "First, I need to understand everything. This wasn't just a cheap affair, Bea. The woman was Sloane Davenport." Beatrice's eyes widened. "From Sterling Nash? Are you serious? Marcus is in the middle of that hostile takeover bid against them. What the hell is he thinking, sleeping with the enemy?" "I don't know," Catherine said. "But I'm going to find out." They drove back to the city in near silence. When she arrived at the empty penthouse, it felt alien, contaminated. She instructed Frank to take her to her father's residence on the Upper East Side. She couldn't bear to be in the home she had shared with Marcus. Just as she was walking into the grand old-world lobby of her father's building, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. She ignored it. He called again, and again. On the 10th call, a text message appeared. "Cat, I know you hate me. I deserve it. But you have to listen. It is not what you think. Sloane is not my mistress. It's business. I am using her. Call me. It's vital." Catherine stared at the message, her heart pounding. I am using her. It was a desperate, self-serving excuse, a classic narcissist's gambit, reframe the betrayal as a brilliant, albeit ruthless, strategic move. He was trying to appeal to her pragmatism, to the part of her that understood the cutthroat world they lived in. She almost deleted it. But the mention of Sloane's name, the sheer audacity of the claim, planted a seed of doubt. What if in some twisted way he was telling a sliver of the truth? The affair being with a direct business rival was too specific, too reckless to be random. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. She's been feeding me inside information on Sterling Nash, their defense strategy, their key shareholder weaknesses. This whole thing was a honey trap, but I was the one setting it. It was for the deal. For us. Please, Kat. I can explain. This was the twist. The sudden, nauseating turn. He was admitting to a different kind of crime. Not just adultery, but a deeply unethical, potentially illegal act of corporate espionage. He wasn't asking for forgiveness for the affair. He was trying to rebrand it as a sacrifice for their financial gain. He was trying to make her an accomplice. The revelation hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless. Her husband was not just a cheat. He was a fool playing a dangerous game, or a monster trying to justify his actions with greed. The line between personal betrayal and professional conspiracy had just been irrevocably blurred. She stood in the marble foyer of her father's building, the phone heavy in her hand. The situation had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. This was no longer just a divorce. It was a war on two fronts. And Marcus, in his desperation, had just handed her a new and powerful weapon, the knowledge of his methods. He thought he was explaining his way out of trouble. He had no idea he was giving her the ammunition she would need to ensure his complete and utter destruction. Alistair Vance's apartment was the antithesis of the sleek, modern penthouse Catherine shared with Marcus. It was a fortress of old money, filled with dark wood, ancestral portraits, and the comforting scent of leather and aged paper. It was a space that radiated permanence and power. Alistair himself was cut from the same cloth. At 65, he was tall and silver-haired, with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He was a man who had weathered market crashes, hostile takeovers, and personal tragedies with the same stoic, unshakable resolve. When Catherine, flanked by a grim-faced Beatrice, told him the story, he listened without interruption, his face an unreadable mask. He didn't rage. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply absorbed the information, his mind processing it, like a complex balance sheet. When she finished showing him the text messages from Marcus, he was silent for a full minute, his steepled fingers resting against his lips. "The man is a fool," he finally said, his voice a low rumble. "But a dangerous one. To attempt to justify infidelity as a business strategy. It's a level of moral bankruptcy that is frankly impressive." "He thinks it will work," Catherine said, her voice hollow. "He thinks I'm so invested in our wealth that I'll forgive the method. He's appealing to my avarice." "He is appealing to what he knows best," Alistair corrected gently. "He judges you by his own debased standards. He has profoundly underestimated you. That will be his undoing." He stood and walked to the vast window overlooking the city. "This is no longer a simple matter for a divorce attorney, Catherine. He has confessed in writing to corporate espionage. He has implicated himself in a plot that could not only destroy him, but also create significant blowback for our family, should it be handled incorrectly." "What do we do?" Beatrice asked, leaning forward. "We have him. Let's just release this to the board of his company." "Let's expose him." "No," Alistair said, turning from the window. "A public explosion is messy. It creates unpredictable shrapnel. We do not move until we control the entire board. We need to be surgical. First, we operate on the assumption that Marcus is lying, that this "I was using her" narrative is a fabrication to save his skin. But we also operate on the assumption that he might be telling the truth, which is in many ways worse. A man who would use an affair as a business tool is capable of any betrayal. Over the next 48 hours, the Vance residence became a war room. Alistair pulled in his top legal counsel and a private investigator, a former Mossad agent named Kobe, who specialized in discreet, high-stakes corporate intelligence. Catherine was not a passive participant. The shock had transformed into a cold, diamond-hard fury. She was an active strategist, her mind honed by a lifetime of observing her father proving to be sharp and ruthless. She provided Kobe with every detail she could remember about Marcus's recent behavior, names he had mentioned, trips he had taken, the new secretive patterns of his work. She gave him the login details to their shared cloud storage family accounts, anything that might hold a clue. Marcus believes his greatest weapon is his intelligence, Catherine told the team, her voice steady. His real weakness is his ego. He believes he is infallible, that he is the smartest man in any room. That's the vulnerability we will exploit. While Kobe began his digital deep dive, Catherine made a call. She dialed Gregory Shaw, Marcus's partner, and the COO of Thorn Capital. Gregory was the cautious, steady hand to Marcus's daring, often reckless genius. He was a numbers man, a risk analyst who had on more than one occasion privately expressed his concerns to Catherine about Marcus's aggressive strategies. Gregory. "It's Catherine Thorn," she said, her voice calm and professional when he answered. "I need to speak with you urgently, in person and off the record. It concerns a significant undisclosed liability to the firm." The gravity in her tone was unmistakable. They agreed to meet the next morning at a quiet cafe far from the financial district. Meanwhile, Kobe hit pay dirt. Buried deep in a nested folder in a shared family cloud account, a folder labeled Vacation Plans that Catherine had forgotten existed, he found Marcus's digital treasure trove. It was a series of encrypted files. But Marcus, in his arrogance, had used a password related to a personal milestone. Kobe's team easily cross-referenced the stock ticker of the first company he had bankrupted. Inside were Marcus's notes on the Sterling Nash takeover, and it confirmed his text messages. He was using Sloan. The files contained detailed summaries of their meetings, listing information she had supposedly provided about Sterling Nash's defense strategies, their board's divisions, their largest institutional shareholders' pressure points. Marcus had meticulously documented his own conspiracy. He saw it as a record of his brilliance. Catherine saw it as a signed confession. But as Kobe dug deeper, another layer emerged. He cross-referenced the intel Sloan had supposedly provided with real-time market data and Sterling Nash's public filings, and he found a discrepancy, a terrifying one. He called Alistair and Catherine into the study. "There is a problem," he said, his Israeli accent precise. "The information from the woman Sloan is not entirely accurate. Some of it is good, just enough to build trust. But the most critical data points, the ones about shareholder positions and their debt covenants, they are subtly wrong. They are not mistakes. They are traps." A hush fell over the room. "Explain," Alistair commanded. "The data Sloan has given him," Kobe continued, pointing to his screen, "is designed to encourage Thorn Capital to launch its takeover bid at a specific price point, targeting specific shareholders. But according to our real analysis, this strategy will fail. It will trigger a poison pill defense we've uncovered in Sterling Nash's corporate bylaws that is far more potent than the one she described. It wouldn't just block the takeover. The blowback would leave Thorn Capital dangerously over-leveraged and vulnerable. The stock would plummet." Catherine felt a chill crawl up her spine. The second twist. The real twist. So she wasn't the honey trap Catherine breathed. He was. She was playing him from the very beginning. Sloane Davenport wasn't a source. She was an assassin. She was feeding Marcus carefully crafted misinformation, leading him and his company towards a cliff, all while stroking his ego and letting him believe he was the master manipulator. She wasn't just sleeping with the enemy. She was gutting him from the inside out, using his own arrogance as her weapon. Alistair Vance allowed a slow, grim smile to spread across his face. "My God," he whispered. "It's brilliant. Utterly ruthless, but brilliant." He looked at his daughter, and his eyes were filled with a new kind of respect. "He handed you the gun to shoot him, and you've just discovered it's a cannon." Catherine now held all the cards. She had proof of Marcus's infidelity. She had his written confession of unethical corporate espionage. And now she had proof that his grand strategy was a catastrophic failure in the making a trap set by the very woman he thought he was controlling. She could not only destroy her husband personally, but could also save his company from his folly, positioning herself as the key player who uncovered the entire conspiracy. The next morning, when she walked into the cafe to meet Gregory Shaw, she was no longer just Catherine Thorne, the wronged wife. She was Catherine Vance, the inheritor of her father's strategic mind and ruthless execution. She was calm, prepared, and ready to make her first move in a game Marcus didn't even know she was playing. The power play had begun. The cafe was a discreet, anonymous place in Tribeca, the kind of establishment where powerful people went to have conversations they didn't want overheard. Gregory Shaw was already there, nursing an espresso, his face etched with worry. He was a man who lived by numbers and data, and the cryptic nature of Catherine's call had clearly unsettled him. "Catherine," he said, rising as she approached. "Thank you for meeting me. Is everything all right? You mentioned a liability." "Hello, Gregory," she said, her voice even. She didn't sit down immediately. "The liability isn't a what, it's a who. It's Marcus." Gregory's expression tightened. "I don't follow. Is this about the Sterling Nash deal?" "I'll admit his strategy is more aggressive than I'd like, but his projections are solid. His projections," Catherine said, "finally taking a seat, are based on a fantasy. A fantasy fed to him by his mistress, Sloane Davenport." The name landed on the table between them with the force of a physical object. Gregory visibly paled. Sloane Davenport. From Sterling Nash. That's impossible. It's professional suicide. For Marcus, yes." Catherine agreed. For her, it's the coup of a lifetime. For the next 20 minutes, Catherine laid it all out. She didn't speak with the emotion of a betrayed wife, but with the cold precision of a CEO delivering a devastating report. She told him about the affair, showing him a single damning piece of evidence on her phone, a time-stamped photo she had instructed Kobe to retrieve from the Seagate security footage, showing Marcus and Sloane entering the elevator together. Then she moved to the business. She explained the honey trap, the manipulated data, the poison pill. She detailed how Sloane was leading Marcus, and by extension the entire firm, into a perfectly designed ambush that would cripple them. She didn't show him Marcus's confessional notes. That was her trump card to be held in reserve. She presented only the hard data. Kobe had compiled the analysis that proved Sloane's information was a lie. Gregory listened, his initial shock turning to dawning horror, and then to cold fury. He was a man who had dedicated his life to building Thorne Capital alongside Marcus, mitigating his partner's risks. to learn that Marcus had exposed them all, not just through recklessness, but through a toxic cocktail of arrogance and infidelity, was the ultimate betrayal. The man is a pyromaniac who thinks he can control fire, Gregory said, his voice shaking with rage. He's going to burn the entire firm to the ground for an ego trip. Yes, Catherine said simply. Unless we stop him. The board meeting to approve the final phase of the takeover is on Friday. We have 2 days. What do you want? Gregory asked, his eyes locking on hers. He was seeing her now not as the boss's wife, but as a player. A formidable one. I want what you want, Gregory. To protect the firm. To excise the cancer. I want you to rally the board members you trust. My father is already making calls to the institutional investors his family has relationships with. When Marcus walks into that boardroom on Friday, he will not be met with applause. He will be met with a unified front. And you? Gregory asked. What is your price? My price, Catherine said. Her voice dropping is his complete removal from the company he founded. His shares will be bought out at a valuation that reflects the damage he has caused. And my divorce will be quiet, swift, and uncontested. He will walk away with enough to live on, but he will be stripped of his power, his reputation, and his legacy. He will be a ghost on Wall Street. It was a ruthless, elegant, and total victory she was outlining. Gregory stared at her for a long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. Friday. We'll be ready. The next 2 days were a blur of encrypted calls, discreet meetings, and strategic maneuvers. Alistair Vance worked his magic behind the scenes, his influence turning the tide of investor sentiment. Gregory Shaw, armed with Catherine's irrefutable proof of the flawed data, secured the loyalty of the other board members. They were all sharks, and they could smell the blood in the water, Marcus's blood. On Friday morning, Marcus Thorne walked into the boardroom on the 50th floor of the Thorne Capitol building, feeling triumphant. He believed he was on the verge of the greatest victory of his career. He had tried calling Catherine dozens of times, but she hadn't answered. He assumed she was angry, hysterical, but would eventually come around once she saw the billions his brilliant, if unorthodox methods had secured for their family. He smiled as he took his seat at the head of the long, polished table. Good morning, everyone. A historic day. No one smiled back. The atmosphere in the room was arctic. Gregory Shaw sat to his right, his face like stone. The other board members stared at him with cold, appraising eyes. Before we begin, Marcus Gregory said, his voice dangerously calm, we have another matter to discuss. An independent risk assessment of the Sterling Nash data has revealed some alarming inconsistencies. Marcus's smile faltered. What are you talking about? My source is ironclad. Is your source Sloane Davenport? Gregory asked flatly. The color drained from Marcus's face. He looked around the room at the hostile faces and realized too late that this was not a meeting. It was an ambush, an execution. And then the boardroom doors opened. Catherine walked in. She was flanked by her father and 2 lawyers. She was composed, powerful, her pregnancy a symbol not of vulnerability, but of the future, a future that would not include him. She took a seat at the opposite end of the table, directly in his line of sight. Catherine, he choked out. What is this? This, Marcus, she said. Her voice, ringing with clarity in the silent room, is called due diligence. Something you abandoned 6 months ago. One of her lawyers slid a folder down the table to him. It contained the photo from the hotel, the analysis of Sloane's flawed data, and on top printouts of his own text messages to Catherine. His own words condemning him. I am using her. He stared at the documents, his empire crumbling before his eyes. He had been outmaneuvered, out-thought, and utterly destroyed. The board has held an emergency session, Gregory announced into the void. We have voted unanimously. We are tabling the Sterling Nash bid indefinitely pending an internal investigation into your conduct, and we are asking for your immediate resignation as CEO and chairman. Marcus looked from the board members to Alistair Vance, whose expression was one of cool satisfaction. Then his gaze fell on his wife. Her face held no pity, no lingering affection. It held only the serene calm of a victor. He was finished. He knew it. Sloane Davenport's scheme had been exposed, but not by him. His affair had been uncovered. His professional judgment was shattered. He had lost everything, all because he had made the fatal mistake of underestimating the woman who carried his child. Catherine stood up, her part in the proceedings complete. She didn't need to say another word. As she walked out of the boardroom, she didn't look back. She was walking towards her new life, one she would forge herself from the ashes of her husband's ruin. She was no longer just a Vance by name. She had become the embodiment of its power. Her child would be born into a legacy not of lies, but of strength secured by a mother who had faced the ultimate betrayal and emerged the queen of the board. In the end, it wasn't the affair that brought down Marcus Thorne's empire. It was his hubris. He believed he could compartmentalize his life, keeping his betrayals neatly separated from his business. But lies are never contained. They bleed. They infect everything they touch. Catherine's journey from a trusting pregnant wife to a cold, calculating strategist shows us that the deepest wounds can forge the strongest armor. She didn't just survive. She conquered. By refusing to be a victim, she rewrote her own story and the future of everyone around her. What do you think? Was Catherine's revenge justified, or was it too ruthless? Could you have done what she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of drama, betrayal, and ultimate empowerment captivated you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good tale of poetic justice, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that are stranger and more compelling than fiction. Thank you for listening.